Hey everyone, thanks for watching this brief PowerPoint on some asynchronous tutoring strategies. And then also I've added some pragmatic tips on how to get that feedback back to your tutee after you're done with it. So let's get started. All right, so some tips for writing better tutorials. You really want to think formative and not summative. So you're not just talking about that one sentence or that one paragraph or that one idea that needs expansion. You're really trying to give the students feedback that will help them in their future writing. So what comment can help them with their writing moving forward, and how can you help them identify their patterns of error so that they take that advice with them for future writing projects. Two, you want to focus really tightly. You can't comment on anything. That's actually not being a generous tutor. What that does is it actually overwhelms the tutee when they see loads of comments. Think about when you've received feedback from your professors and there's been a load of comments. That can be a bit intimidating and overwhelming. And as a result, you might not even pay attention to the comments. So instead, you want to focus tightly, choose one or two things, and focus tightly on them in your comments. You want to be straightforward. So avoid any type of couching language. Couching language is like, maybe you should consider doing this. Instead, we're gonna avoid that type of couching language and instead be more specific. So instead of saying maybe you should do X, Y, and Z, instead say I suggest you do X, Y, and Z, and that would result in A, B, and C. So you're telling them exactly what you want them to do in a very clear way. They know that's what you want them to do, and you're not using language that could be ambiguous or confusing. You want to teach, don't talk. So if they need to go back to the brainstorming stage of the writing process, you want to tell them that and then explain how it would help their paper. And then finally, format thoughtfully. So use different colors, different fonts, italicize when you're inside their text so they know the difference between what they're writing and your writing, and it helps to bring attention to some of the feedback that you're offering. So when we think about formative feedback and focusing tightly, you really want to think about problem-centered instruction. So that's the equivalent of choosing our battles, right? So you can't address all of the things, you can address the most important things. You want to prioritize the things just as you would do in a face-to-face session. Your goal is to take the writing to the next level of competence, right? So we're going to focus on what we all know are higher order concerns, teach primarily about those concerns. I wouldn't say 100% avoid most correctness level stuff. You'll have a lot of tutees who want feedback on that. So what I'd prefer you to do is identify patterns, give them strategies to fix their errors, and then encourage them to develop robust editing strategies by following your lead. So for that tight focus, you want to think quickly and carefully about how to enable students to succeed with their given assignments. And your comments will all support that, right? So focus your comments on those specific issues and teach the biggest problems for greatest effect. So you might want to work on, say, grammar. The student might want you to work on grammar, but really we have some idea development issues. It would be better if you focused on that and then have a secondary comment that talks about, say, patterns of error that the student might have. So as we talk about in all of our training and our orientation, we're going to focus on higher order concerns. This is what we do in face-to-face sessions and in our online sessions. So you want to make sure that the text is meeting the specific content requirements for the assignment. So hopefully, and we're going to prompt students to do this in addition to uploading their text, they're also going to upload their assignment sheet. Other content-based issues, that you can focus on and support students in is their thesis, developing sufficient detail, reasonings, examples, organizing according to the genre or assignment, and that's where all of our style guides, our Purdue OWL come in to help us with that. And of course, all of our resources on our Writing Center website have loads of genre-specific handouts, and then using outside sources as needed, as I mentioned. So lower order concerns, you all know about that. Our tutors, our tutees often seem to hyper-focus on that, but there's loads of reasons why. Their professors hyper-focus on those as well. So we want to think about readable or well-written sentences, well-proofed text, and correct in-text citations and reference pages per the required style manual. So again, you can, if you have a 7-page paper, you're not expected to go through the entire paper and correct their grammar. Instead, I encourage you to go through maybe one paragraph, find some patterns of error, and in detailed comments explain what the error is, how they can fix that error, and where they can go for more resources. So if you can do those 3 things and supports your tutees that way, that's really going to help them in future writing assignments as well. So I know that we're in the South, and being polite is something that we pride ourselves on. Being straightforward does not mean not being polite. So I'm not asking you to kind of go against some of these ingrained kind of cultural norms that we have here in the South, but instead it's just, I want you to be direct with your language. And direct language is not equal giving the answer or doing the student's work. Instead, you want to, each of your words should be meaningful, purposeful, and consciously straightforward so that the student doesn't see any ambiguity in there. Linguistically indirect language, that's that couching language that I mentioned in an earlier slide, can be confusing for tutees, especially our multilingual learners or maybe our first-gen students. So be as direct as possible. That would be most useful. If you like, and this is what I often do, I'll put a please in front of a directive, and that's usually quite useful. Please revise this sentence for clarity. This is what it should look like. This is a possibility of how you can approach revising for clarity. And this is the result of what your reader encounters if you do revise for clarity. So the please is really useful, I think, in putting them in front of directives. So there's no ambiguity there, but you still have that politeness. So what we're really doing when we're doing this asynchronous tutoring, more so I think than in our face-to-face, is that there's a more emphasis on teaching than on tutoring, but they still go hand in hand. So we'll just bring over some of our tutoring strategies that will work in our asynchronous sessions as well. So we're going to ask who, what, where, why, and how questions. We're going to teach our tutees by demonstrating. So if they have, say, a comma splice, you can write that sentence over again, fixing that comma splice, and that's a way to demonstrate. Illustrating, modeling, providing doable tasks with instructions to try them out, and explaining. What I like to do with my students when they're doing a revision is I'll offer them a revision plan. First, you should do X, Y, and Z. Second, then take a look at A, B, and C. Third, then finish up and edit and take a look at your works cited pages. So by giving them a revision plan, you're offering very straightforward, step-by-step strategy for how to address not only this paper, but all future papers. And you want to personalize the tutorial. I think that's super important. Use the student's name more than once. I often, when I write my end comment, or when you write your, as you often do at your client report forms, you start that off with a tutee's name. I think that's really wonderful. Let's continue that practice here. Write the response to the student without canned examples. I think that goes without saying. You all are pretty creative as it is. And then use the student's own writing in your tutorial. So instead of coming up with a fake sentence to show how one would fix a comma splice, use that student sentence to show them how to fix a comma splice. So I thought this was a great slide. I borrowed it from my good friend Beth Leahy at UT Chattanooga, and I think it really identifies the ways in which our regular appointments, our face-to-face appointments, kind of map onto these asynchronous appointments. So you'll want to manage your time, right? This is something that we do all the time in our face-to-face sessions. You'll have 60 minutes to read and give feedback. You don't want to go over. You want to stay within that time. So really, what I would prefer is if you do this within a 45-minute, and then you have that 15-minute to send off the client report form, make sure everything's saved correctly, all of that. Make sure you understand what the student is looking for and what the instructor is looking for. This is what we do in face-to-face sessions and in our online face-to-face sessions, so let's continue that. We will prompt the students to not only upload their draft, but also their assignment sheet, so that can help you as you're going through their paper. But students might also just copy and paste the assignment right onto their draft, so keep that in mind. Focus on, again, support themes and creating a plan of action rather than editing or proofreading the document. This is what you do in face-to-face. Consider your own feedback style and adapt it to the written responses. So you really don't need to reinvent yourself or create a new tutoring persona. You'll be your same person. It'll just be in written form rather than in an embodied form. The consultant's letter of written feedback will be written in the client report form. So we say letter, I don't mean a full letter, I just mean a paragraph or two, a kind of end comment that encapsulates what the student should do next. You'll put that at the bottom of every paper that you evaluate and give feedback on, and then you'll also just copy and paste that end comment into the client report form. And then the consultation will include suggestions and comments on the client's document, which will be attached to the client report form. So they'll have that end comment and then perhaps some comments throughout the text. You'll download all of that onto your laptop, save it after you put all your comments on it, and then you'll upload it again to the client report form. You'll attach it there. So again, I want to emphasize, and this is probably about the third time this PowerPoint that you've heard me say this, but you can't do it all, right? You won't be able to address every single thing. That's the kind of constraints of giving written feedback, is you're not able to have those small little conversational asides about things that you would have in a face-to-face. So just remember that and be forgiving with yourself that you can't do all of the things that maybe you want to do and give feedback on all of the things that you want to give feedback on. So when you first start, you want to make sure that you don't overwhelm the writer when in giving too much feedback. Review the paper first and then ask yourself what the most important concerns you think you should address. We'd rather see you address 3 to 4 concerns in detail using the 4-step method that we're going to get to in the next slide than to comment on every issue you see. And think about the stage the writer's in at the process and make recommendations accordingly. If you think they should kind of seek out another review for other writing concerns, let them know that. And that they should come back for one more session to say maybe look at X, Y, and Z after they incorporate your initial suggestions. All right, y'all, so here's the 4-step process that I think is going to be incredibly useful in your asynchronous tutoring practice. This was created by Dr. Beth Hewitt, and she talked about it a lot when she was here in October. But my good friend Beth Leahy created this slide, so I want to give them credit for it. All right, so it really is about explaining the issue to the student, why the issue is a problem, how do you revise the problem, and then giving the student something to do in revision. So our goal is to help the student develop strategies for revising their own work, and students should walk away with a to-do plan, and I think that's really useful for students to have a step-by-step plan for them in revision that either addresses higher order concerns or lower order concerns or both. And this 4-step process is a kind of way to help guide you, the tutor, to develop this strategy that you can use in all of the asynchronous sessions. So here's an example. This is what it looks like, okay? So on the right here, you'll see the sample sentence from a student. The decision tree was implemented, and then reflexive monitoring was conducted. All right, so that's a sentence that we probably have all come in contact with, either in face-to-face or in our online sessions, and it's written in passive voice. So let's pretend that this is written in passive voice for a discipline that does not like passive voice. And it's an APA style. So the what would be, this sentence is written in passive voice. And why is that a problem? Well, APA discourages passive voice. So how do we fix passive voice? To make this sentence active, consider something like, quote, nurses implemented the decision tree, comma, and the researcher then conducted reflexive monitoring. And then the last step is the do, right? The sentences highlighted in yellow also use passive voice. Consider revising so that the sentences are clear about who is doing what. So this is what the 4-step process looks like when addressing one particular pattern of error, and that's passive voice. So as I mentioned, at the end of each paper that you review, you'll have an end comment. This is often referred to as the letter that goes out to the student. So you'll have your suggestions and comments that will be attached to the client report form, and your letter, your end comment of response, will be in the body of the client report form. And in the next slide, I talk about some of the logistics that you need to remember when you give that feedback back to the student. But in this client report form, you'll just continue doing the great things that you already do in your client report forms. You'll summarize key themes that you observed, including areas that warrant praise. Y'all are so positive with your feedback to students, and I want you to continue doing that. I think it's wonderful. You'll advise students how much or which parts of the assignment you were able to review. So for example, if you were only able to review the intro and the first 5 pages, you'll say that there. Respond to any questions or concerns raised by the student, and note any aberration from professor assignment. So for example, this assignment was meant to be a research proposal and lit review, but you appear to have drafted a summary. So make sure that that's clear. If the paper does not align with the assignment, you want to make that clear in that client report form. Provide an action plan for the next steps and revision. And again, I love bullet points. I love numbered lists. Help your students out. That's going to help them. So my first step, I need to find more sources. And then 2, I need to figure out how to synthesize my sources. And 3, I want to organize my paper, right? So 1, 2, and 3, that's really useful. You'll include links to resources, both internal MTSU Writing Center and external, say like the OWL Purdue website. And then include comment suggestions like read paper aloud or use a different font when proofing, etc. as needed. So this is a screenshot of what the client report form will look like in an asynchronous tutoring session. So you will make sure that you click client and student and staff resource. So you'll get a copy as well. You'll select the file over here. And then for file visibility, you want to make sure that you click clients and administrators via appointment form and client report form. So that's going to be super important so that the student gets the text that they need and that the file attaches to the client report form. Now, if you forget to attach the document, that happens. What do? You can't go back into a client report form. That's okay. Just email the student directly from your MTSU email account. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, email Jim, Carey, or myself, and we'll get it to them through our email accounts. That's perfectly fine. These things happen. I have sent many of an email out and forgetting to attach stuff. All right, so what now? You'll conduct your first written feedback consultation. We are going to start that next Monday, the 20th. You'll download your assigned paper and save it with the student's title and UWC. So for example, my lit paper _ UWC. That'll make sure it differentiates between the original and then the document on which you offered feedback. You'll conduct written feedback consultation using this paper and draft feedback as if it was going directly to the client, because it is. You'll complete the client report form using the steps on the previous slides. And then I just want to emphasize this. If you come across any tips or tools to improve this process, please share them. We are a very, very much a kind of open community where we like to share with each other our hacks and strategies for helping each other out. So any ideas on how to improve the experience for ourselves or for our clients is welcome. All right, I want to thank you all so much for listening. Please let us know if you have any questions or concerns. I think you're all well able to do this, and I appreciate you all being willing to do this and support our MTSU writers during this time. Thank you.